Welcome to the Put on Waivers Media Group, home of the Put on Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
To be a successful thing for him, going into from the Bama defense to the Raider defense, if you will. So the next pick, and I know, is it the very next pick that we had? It was this
pick 100 is Trey Tucker.
Trey Tucker. So this is the Waller pick, right? So this is the Darren Waller pick. So here's I'm looking at the Raiders roster at wide receiver. Jacoby Myers. We got Devontae Adams. They brought Cole back. They got Dorsett, Sims, Chris Lacey, and Tyler Johnson. So also have Renfro still. You got DeAndre Carter, Trey Tucker, and DJ Turner. So this is
Sims too. I think Sims is making the roster.
Yeah. So my thing is, so we like speed. Everybody likes speed. Nobody dislikes speed on this program. The guy was the 222nd overall player, and they took him at 100. So that's a conversation. And I think also we're talking about returnability, talk about special teams ability in a league where they're trying to actually take that away. Like kickoff returns are like almost non-existent, and then punt returns. Every time you get a good one, it's always a penalty. They just. I mean, it's just no matter who the team is. And kickers have been so good kicking the ball inside the 20. You end up just fair catching almost everything as well. Don't want to hear about the Tyreek Hill comparisons. Don't want to hear about that. But I mean, he add value as a player? Yes, but some of these guys on this roster, you almost think you would think that like Philip Dorsett, people like that, DeAndre Carter, think they got a chance to make the roster if they sign with the Raiders, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, and then the Renfro situation, like what does that do for Renfro? Like, obviously he adds an element of speed that a lot of these guys don't have. Well, maybe Dorsett back when he's a little bit younger, but what are your thoughts about this pick? Because this was definitely of all the picks, this was not because the player is bad, but just where they drafted him, and it seemed like they have an abundance of players at that position already.
Yeah, nothing against Trey Tucker. I think this is a reach. My only concern here is they lost the draft pick by taking Tucker at 100, and I'll explain. They could have taken Jacorian Bennett at 100, and no one would have blinked an eye. But they traded up from 109 to 104, and they gave away a fifth-round pick. So had they taken Bennett at 100 and just waited till like 109 to take Tucker, then you would still have another fifth-round pick to address another defensive need. So it actually cost you a player in the draft by taking him at 100. Now, I hear the speed, the playmaking ability. I want to say he averaged like 12 yards a catch at Cincinnati. This guy wasn't getting 20, 22 yards to catch down the field. So now you're talking about he has some toughness, returnability. He didn't return punts at Cincinnati either. So I see a lot of people saying, oh, this guy's going to be the punt returner. I think he returned like 4 punts at Cincinnati. So he's essentially just a kick returner and a gunner. I don't see the value in the third round. As good as a player he is, the draft's about value and finding it in certain spots. And I think they reached here a little bit. I don't know if he's going to have much of an impact as a slot receiver this year. This is more of a down the road. So I understand they need speed on this offense to open it up for Devontae and Michael Mayer and Hunter Renfro. Trey Tucker is not going to get offensive snaps, and when he does, it's going to be jet screens, bubble screens, those jet sweeps, like stuff where when he's on the field, the ball is probably going his way.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
I don't really like those guys in offenses because
too.
the defense knows kind of what's coming, and you're not going to put him on the field for 30 plays and not get him the ball.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, I don't have anything against Tucker as a player. Hopefully, he's a great kickoff returner. He's a great gunner, and then you can assimilate him into the offense more in year 2, year 3. I think giving up the 5th-round pick to get Bennett is a function of taking Tucker where they took him. And you lost a valuable draft pick to do it for a guy who's going to have special team impacts. And I think we're kind of snake bitten with the whole Tanner Muse, special teams war daddy, 3rd-round pick. I think it was the same pick, 100. And it's a position where they didn't really need anyone because DeAndre Carter could have filled the role that Tucker's going to have this year outside of the gunner. So the only thing he brings is that gunner ability on special teams, but you can find corners to do that. So I think they fell in love with the player, and that happens. Trust me, it happens in all sports and all drafts. And I think they really wanted to go get him. They probably could have waited just a little bit to still get him at that point.
Yeah, and I think you echo my sentiments exactly. Like those times where he gets on the field and you just know the ball is going there because he's on the field because he's not in a lot of packages. So you could have kind of shored up. You could have shored up your secondary a little bit and draft somebody like Mekhi Blackton. You stuff. I mean, like all the deep. I mean, the linebacking situation is probably not the best. It's probably the worst in the National Football League. Yeah, I don't think there's a team that has a worse linebacking core than the Raiders. So we can talk about potential Patrick Queen trade all we want until it happens. We can't bank on that as well. So yeah, I did. This was coach's favorite. Like this screams that he might. Listen, the Raiders don't win. He might not be here to coach to coach the kid.
It has a little bit of. Now, obviously, Matthew Slater wasn't drafted in the third round. I want to say he was the seventh rounder undrafted free agent, but there was this kind of player on the Patriots roster for a long time, kind of that like last receiver on the roster, special teams demon.
Yeah.
Now, Slater was on coverage units. He wasn't a kick returner, but like maybe they see a little bit of what Matt Slater brought to the Patriots on the special team side, plus the speed factor of actually being a productive receiver in college. Now, he wasn't an explosive productive receiver, but he was productive. And maybe them thinking, okay, a year or two from now, if Hunter Renfro's not here, and all these other guys are on shorter term contracts, maybe they can work him in this offense with Josh McDaniels, with everything they have to know about defenses and all the routes switching and all the combinations. I don't expect Trey Tucker to pick this thing up and be playing a lot of offense until at least mid-season in specialized packages because they have so many other options. They can put Myers in the slot. They can put Renfro in the slot. They can put Carter in the slot. They can put DJ Turner in the slot. They can put Adams in the slot. They don't need this guy in the slot this year. So I think there's a little bit of Matthew Slater kind of in this pick from the New England days.
I would say I think you said a little bit in this. They don't need this guy, and I would go to the point where they don't need this guy. Period. Like I mean, a nice player. If he was drafted later on, then okay, fine. But I just don't think this was one where they just. I mean, they fell in love, and the coach fell in love with him, and he just wants him on the team.
Honestly, if you wanted an elite gunner, you had Matt Collins on the roster who signed for jump change. You could have just kept him. And the Raiders have had elite gunners. They had Cordarrelle Patterson. He's an elite gunner, or was. Matt Collins is an elite gunner. I don't think it changed the Raiders' special teams dramatically having that kind of guy in the roster. So we'll see. Maybe he does return punts, but he didn't do it in college.
Yeah, interesting talk there. Let's go to Jacorian Bennett. I think I like this pick. It's one of my favorite ones. Overall, he was 113th, and he was drafted at 104. They had a good second. They had a decent secondary. Some really good secondary play in Maryland. Looks like because they had a couple guys go in this draft. I do like the player. I think he's going to help out a lot. He might even, if the kid stays healthy and picks up the system, he might even be starting. Because I mean, when you look at who's playing in front of him, everybody's on a 1-year deal. So it's not like he's playing in a situation where it's some elite guy in front of him. He's not so there's no Ty Law in front of him playing football. So he should be good to go. What are your thoughts about that? I do like his ability to leap and jump with 50-50 balls. Even though he's a guy who, even though he's a 5'11" corner, 5'10" corner, he still can do those things. It was interesting that when they showed a lot of people were showing his highlights, and I guess they were playing Purdue, and he was just eating up, looked like Aiden O'Connell a little bit in those highlights. But we'll leave that for the next pick. Thoughts about Bennett here?
Yeah, I think this is good value, and you get to this part of the draft now. You're looking for traits, physical traits that guys can bring that you can develop into potential starters. That he has that. He runs a 4.3. He gets his hands on the balls. Now it's not a ton of interception production, but he does get past his defense. Now, can he clean up some of his technique, be a little bit less handsy? Yeah, a lot. That basically is the issue with most corners that come out. But where they took him, I think this guy's a surefire starter in 2024. I think he's starting next year. I
Yep.
don't know this year if he breaks into the starting roster. If it depends on the injury situation. The Raiders have had a lot of injuries, but I think early in the season they're going to rely more on Nate Hobbs, Brandon Faison, Duke Shelley, who they brought in, and kind of mix and match those outside corners. But I wouldn't be shocked if I look up in week 10 and Bennett's starting, and then obviously going into next year, he has that kind of a capability. And if you're taking a guy in the 4th round, and especially in the secondary, he's going to contribute this year, whether he plays in the nickel or whether he plays in the dime package as a 4th corner. They're going to find a spot to get him on the field just because of that speed and matching up with some of those speed guys within the division. And he does have a chance to be a starter next year. And as you mentioned, all those guys are on 1-year deals. Nate Hobbs has 2 years left on a rookie contract. So they're not committed to really anybody in that secondary long term. So he has a great opportunity to come in and make a name for himself. And I think he will. And like I said, where they're picking, it's really good value. I'd give them an A for that pick for where they took him.
Yeah, exactly. I love the pick. I love that pick. I love one of my favorite ones. I think he and Michael Mayer are definitely my favorite picks of this. I think, I mean, obviously Tyree Wilson is Tyree Wilson, but I do like that pick a lot. Totally agree with you on that one. You knew they would do it. You knew they would do it. That's one thing that comes over from the Patriot way. That they were going to pick a quarterback not in the first round, because they feel like they can always find somebody. They did pick Mac Jones in the first round, but I mean, a lot of Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy G, all later round picks. Thoughts about Aiden O'Connell from Purdue? It seems like he's the kind of prototypical, how can I say, statuesque quarterback that
He's a tree. I think they called him a tree.
He's a tree, so he's not moving. So like he might, so if the ball's not out quick, it might be a sack. What are your thoughts about him? I mean, obviously he's not going to be pressured to play right away. If he actually played this year, that must mean everything, all hell broke loose out there in Vegas.
I'll preface it by saying this: I don't like the pick. I don't like it. I don't like it in the 4th round.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't like it in the 5th round. I don't like it in general because you're losing a roster spot. You're not going to release him. You're not taking him in the 4th round to release him, and he's not going to beat out Brian Hoyer. In my opinion, Brian Hoyer is the backup on this team. So now you're going to have to carry a 3rd quarterback. It's going to cost you depth at another position for a guy who hopefully doesn't play this year. It's a great story. He's got some accuracy. Miss me with the Tom Brady release and all that. That's just hyperbole.
Stop.
Can he be a productive backup in the right system down the line? Yeah, I think there's a chance this guy can be a number 2 quarterback a couple of years from now. I don't think it's this year. I probably don't think it's next year, but I don't like it. I think it was just an overreaction to like a couple of quarterbacks came off the board and they traded up to get him. That's the other thing. Again, they lost more valuable draft picks. These are 2 trade ups at 100 and 134 where they didn't get value with either pick and they lost future picks. So that would be my one criticism of this draft with Ziegler. I've never been an Aiden O'Connell fan. And then on top of it, if you read some of like Hondo Carpenter stuff yesterday, and he lost me with all 3 of those articles. I think the Raiders took 7 future Hall of Famers after reading that. But he was talking about Aiden O'Connell was a 1st or 2nd round pick by many teams in 2021. Like, come on. We know that's not true. I don't know anything about him personally. I hope he turns out to be a good quarterback, but I don't see a way that he beats out Brian Hoyer as the backup and you traded up in the 4th round on a team that needs pieces on defense. I don't like it.
This to me is like more like, this is where I think you have the play caller as a head coach, and there's moments where he says he has to go to the bathroom, and then you lock the draft room door, and you block his calls because that's is what that pick means to me. Like you cannot, when you take him in that spot, you just can't do it when you have so many holes. I mean, on this team, like you just cannot even do it. I just want to just check out real quick who they picked, who they missed out on by grabbing him. But like, they didn't have a linebacker. It just doesn't make it. I mean, they don't have any linebacking prospects on this team at all. Like you can't sit there and just and do that. Like you can't. So after O'Connell was the last pick in that. Let's go to
we talked a lot about Jake Haener. I would much rather have Jake Haener than Aiden O'Connell.
I would too. I would too. So they, I mean, they just like, it's just you cannot. I mean, I think I'd rather. I mean, I'd rather have DTR or Clayton Tune than him than to him too. But I mean, you have to solidify yourself with some you gotta just kind of get some bodies on defense and hope some of these guys like give you some value because I don't I mean I'm not sitting there saying this league is about building the Ravens defense or the Chicago Bear defense from back in the day, but you got to have some comparable pieces here. You can't get you're not going to win every game 45-40. Like it's just not gonna happen, especially if Jimmy's the quarterback. Jimmy is not even a guy who you want to throw the ball 40 times to. The Raiders are planning on playing ball control the whole time with Josh Jacobs, who still remains unsigned. Like I mean, that you have you. It just makes no. This one is probably I like Trey Tucker is a afterthought compared to this one because again, like you mentioned losing the pick, and then just like he's not a guy who's physically going to play anytime soon, and so why would you occupy that when you have so many needs?
Yeah, I think maybe the thought process is you can release Brian Hoyer at the end of camp and get him on the practice squad as one of those veteran guys and get this guy on the roster. But if the Raiders are at a point where they have to play him this year, it's not a good situation. And I look at it this way: I don't like taking quarterbacks later on teams that have a ton of needs. Now, if you're a playoff caliber team, absolutely keep taking and developing them. But right now, this is not a playoff caliber roster. And on top of that, if Jimmy G plays 2 years and then the Raiders in the quarterback market, it's not going to matter that O'Connell's on the roster. They're going to take one in the first or second round. So he's not beating out that guy and he's not beating out Jimmy G. So he's basically you're looking at a backup at best on a team that doesn't really need that right now. They don't need that developmental guy behind them. Now, can they get him on the practice squad? Probably, but why would you trade up in the fourth round to take a quarterback that you hope you can sneak through to the practice squad? I don't think they're carrying three quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the other issue. They didn't do it last year, but hopefully he's good. I just again the value. I don't see the value in giving up a draft pick and moving up to the fourth round to take a guy who, in a perfect world, doesn't play a snap this year or next year.
Yeah, I don't like that pick at all. I don't like it. Christopher Smith, safety, Georgia. Like this pick a little bit better than O'Connell. 170. Sorry, 143 overall. They're able to get him at 170. A guy who can make some plays on the ball, tackler, all the stuff like that. We thought about Chris Smith and his play at Georgia and how he kind of fits in with Patrick Graham, what he wants to do.
This is kind of the opposite of the Bennett pick. This is not the highly athletic ability to develop into a starter. I think Chris Smith is more of the undersized, didn't test very well, but instincts get him to the football. And I think athletically, he's going to be a little bit more challenged in the NFL, especially when he's going to have to cover guys. If he's not big and he doesn't run fast, so if he gets stuck in this system where they're playing cover 4, or maybe they're playing cover 1, or he's going to have to get down in the slot in some of these base defenses if he's a starter and not a sub package player, that he's going to get exposed a little bit. But in the 5th round, you're getting a highly productive player who's not afraid to stick his nose in there and make tackles. And hopefully the athletic limitations, and that's why he's there in the 5th round, is because athletically he's limited. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good football player, and you can't have enough of those guys on the roster. So can they find a way to get him into sub packages? Is a rookie? Is he going to play a lot of special teams? He's not a guy that you can bring on the field in a nickel situation and line him up across from a linebacker or from a tight end. So you're basically looking at just a free safety. There's not a lot of versatility to move him around in the defensive packages. But he's a guy that's can get himself through his instincts and his intellect around the football and make plays. And the Raiders just haven't had safeties that have made plays. So it's a good opportunity to take him right there. He has a chance, I think, to be a starter next year. But I think athletically, Trayvon Merrick, I thought played really well after Abram was released, and he's a better athlete, better range, better size. I don't see Smith beating out Merrick for that free safety spot unless Merrick plays more strong safety like he did towards the end of last year. But then I don't see him beating out Epps. And I honestly think when they go to dime, you're going to see a bigger package for Palomau. because of his size and length and his ability to cover tight ends. So it's good. It's a good depth player that's going to be productive. He's going to know where to be on the football field. He's not going to get himself into out of position. And I think there's some special teams value. So I'd say it's like a B. I like the pick. I'm not going to get carried away and say this guy's going to make a Pro Bowl starting free safety. But in the fifth round, this is a good football player.
No Hall of Fame. No Hall of Fame for Chris Smith.
I'll have to check Hondo's article and get back to you. I stopped reading after I got to when he said O'Connell was a first or second round graded quarterback in 2021. I hit.
He fell asleep on the plane on that one. As far as so for me, when I think about him, is like he's a guy who is gonna do hard worker, always gonna be studying film and kind of just being able to recognize what the offense is trying to do, but doesn't have the athletic ability to make up for a mistake. So if he makes a mistake, then he's not going to have the makeup speed or the jumping ability, leaping ability, all those things like that to kind of make up for that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
No. So yeah.
I don't want to use these names.
Yeah, let me
Raider fans
give it to us.
Scared.
Give it to us.
Think of like Reggie Nelson towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
Like he got in the spot, made the interceptions, made some plays, but he's also going to give up some plays. And then I hate to say LaMarcus Joyner, but Joyner was a better athlete.
Yeah.
But kind of size limitation on the back end, but he was more physical and could play in the slot, or at least the Raiders thought he could play in the slot. But he was a much better athlete than Smith. But if Smith can stick on this roster for 4 or 5 years, give special team ability and step in and start due to injury and find a role in some sort of sub package, it's a good pick.
Okay, if they're on your team in a couple of years, for 3 or 4 years, that's a good pick. And they're not, in the courtroom. That's even better. Amari Burney, Florida, 6'2", 230 pounds. He was the 243rd ranked player. And then he got drafted at 203. If you watch college football, he was the guy who made that interception of Cam Rising in that hotly contested Utah Florida game, first game of the year. A guy who went from safety to linebacker. So now he's going to be playing. I'm not sure if he's going to be playing linebacker or safety in the league. It sounds like it's going to be linebacker. He does run well. That's one of the things that he does. What are your thoughts about Amari Burney?
I think he's battling for the last linebacker spot with Luke Masterson, the linebacker Butler. They got out of Arizona State. So this is a special team sub package player. I don't see starter long term, but the coverage ability gives him a chance to play in the nickel as a coverage linebacker who can athletically move with running backs out in space. He can run with tight ends down the seam. But his primary ability here is going to be on special teams covering kicks. And, hopefully he can make the team due to those coverage abilities. Raiders haven't had a linebacker that can cover a lot. Again, it's a guy who's probably not going to play a ton of snaps this year. This is a developmental guy who has a specialty to be a coverage guy. He's not going to be a starter. He's not going to line up and be a guy next year or even the year after that's going to play every snap. There's a niche for this guy, and he has the ability to be that sub-package linebacker and special teams guy, and that's the position he's going to be fighting for on this roster.
Yeah,
and when you're at the end of the 6th round, that's what you're picking from.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fine. And then next to Jade. So what's that? I say? Why can't I say his last name? This is Silvera. So he 233 and then 289 on the numbers as far as where he was. Arizona State run stopper, right? They really want to get these trenches correct, right? So they pick another defensive tackle here, and then try to shore up the run. So on first and shore up first and second down. So on third down, they can go get the quarterback.
Yeah, this is just you're rolling the dice on a versatile defensive lineman. He went to Miami, transferred to Arizona State as a grad student, but he's a 3 technique, so he's a sub package inside guy that has the ability to get through the gap. He's a 1 gap guy. Maybe there's a little bit of pass rush here, but ideally he's on the practice squad. And if there's some injuries along the front, you don't have to rely on the Kyle Peckos of the world. You can bring this guy up. You can play him at 5 technique and a 3-4. You can play him at that big defensive end. You can slide him inside in a sub package. But it's just another body to rotate around that does have a little bit of that burst off the snap. So you're thinking maybe some pass rush at 3 technique. I don't expect him to make the roster. The Raiders have a ton of young and defensive linemen on this roster. I don't expect Bernie either, honestly. I think they're both practice squad candidates. But you can never have enough defensive bodies, and maybe there is a role for these guys. And it's going to be mainly due to injury. I think the Raiders' defensive line is pretty much going to be set going to training camp. I don't think they're moving on from Butler or Farrell. And obviously, Young's going to make this team. Crosby, Jones will make the team. Wilson's going to make the team. So I don't see a real chance for this guy to stick in the initial 53. But I do think at some point during the season, there will be an opportunity for him to contribute.
Yeah, it should be interesting there. Anybody?